Everyone, good evening. Carl Steinbeck here. And what a day it was in the Kouri Richins trial there in Utah, where we had closing arguments and a verdict all in one day. This is really great to see that the judge allowed them to deliberate and didn't try to cut it short and send them home at 4 o'clock, like we've seen in another case in Massachusetts. So it's something that I was wanting to get on to yesterday and cover the trial then, but surprisingly, about 9:20 last night, I was going to jump on sometime after 10, and what we had was the power went out. We had a 12-hour power shortage here in San Antonio just for some minor winds, so it's really bizarre. It was like there's outage all over the city, and so we had no power for 12 hours, Leslie and I. So anyway, we had a weird start and to the day, but anyway, so hopefully we'll have power here generating tonight. And anyway, yeah, I do have a cold. I've been fighting something here as well. But in any event, what I want to do is maybe do a shorter version tonight. And what would I do is have the openings, or excuse me, the closings be covered here. And maybe I'm saying that wrong. Were the closings yesterday? Gosh, it seems like they're all today. But anyway, getting my wires crossed here because I'm, like I say, I'm fighting something. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump on to a phenomenal day in court again for the prosecution. This judge is awesome. He's a great guy to practice in front of. He's totally fair and reasonable. And he understands the law really good, which is really important. A lot of judges, they don't really understand a lot of the rules and evidence. I've never seen a judge understand rules of evidence as good as this guy here. So anyway, that was that's good to see for justice, because anyway, judges tipping their hands on the scale can result in unfair outcomes. So let's go ahead. Brad Bloodworth. I mean, he's an engineer from West Point. He's also got a master's degree, and he's a true soldier. He's an infantry officer, airborne ranger. I mean, this is one tough dude. This is not some pushover kind of guy. So, but what he does do, he doesn't try to flaunt that. And so I think he's like, I've seen guys that are really the best officers in the military. They don't go around trying to show off or brag about it. They're just unassuming men that just are consummate professionals to go about their business, and they don't get caught up in unnecessary things. So yeah, and he was a JAG like me, and like I've said before, we never crossed paths in the Army JAG Corps. I think he's like 13 years behind me, so we just didn't have any many assignments that were in the same locale probably either, if he's going through the ranks of the JAG. But then I think he got out early before he retired or something. So in any event, great job by Bloodworth today, or in his closing, I should say. Right now, I can't even remember when it's the closing, yesterday or today, so I apologize.
Defendant is guilty or not guilty. In making your decision, do not consider what punishment could.
Here we go.
He had money. They had a son, married, and had 2 more sons. Kouri Richins was on her way. But she was unhappy. She wanted to leave Eric Richins, but did not want to leave his money. Their prenuptial agreement meant that if she left him, she would also leave most of his money. So
I thought it's really good the way he started out, because what this was about was, yeah, this is all the same day, so I'm not losing it here. What this is about is really financial motive. The financial motive is just overwhelming in this case. I mean, sometimes you have somewhat of a tenuous link to make, or you have a strong case. This was just coming at from every direction, just crushing Kouri. And so anyway, yeah, Tatted TT, should I reach out to Brad and see if it come on your channel? Yeah, maybe I should do that. So good idea. Don't know if you'd have any interest in that, but normally I don't have any folks that I interview for the most part, but yeah, that's somebody I would enjoy to have on. So thanks for the idea. Let's go here.
Kouri Richins took $250,000 in equity out of Eric Richins' home without him knowing it, so that she could start her own business and earn enough money to leave Eric Richins. Kouri Richins is intensely ambitious.
I mean, he just really characterized her so well in his opening and talking about how extremely motivated she is and resourceful and words like that.
First with Eric's money and then other people's money, Kouri Richins carefully curated the facade of a privileged, affluent, successful business owner. Behind the facade, however, Kouri Richins was incompetent. She took tremendous risks. She borrowed money by any means necessary at exorbitant rates. She gambled other people's money and lost. Her business was imploding. All the while, Kouri Richins was more interested in spending time with Josh Grossman than Eric. She dreamed of living in the Midway Mansion with Josh, running it as an event center, farming and raising kids, Eric's kids. But she did not have the money to leave Eric or the money to salvage her business. Kouri Richins is an intensely ambitious person.
Yeah, what he's doing here, I saw a comment also to that. He knows the case inside out. He doesn't need to have note cards or PowerPoints or a notebook there in front of him at the lectern. Excuse me. So this is the way prosecutors should be. That's the way defense attorneys should be. All trial attorneys should be. They should know their case inside and out. So this is the way to do it. A+.
She is a risk taker. There was a way forward. Eric had to die.
That's so critical here, folks, because the only way she had any opportunity to turn this swamp mansion into a palace for her was to kill Eric. That's the only way she could come across millions of dollars. It still wouldn't have been successful because she didn't have the business smarts to know how about going this and understanding risk for different big adventures like this. But in her mind, this is going to set her up, and she's going to live better than those peoples whose houses she cleaned in Park City when she was younger. So this is here. He's posting a quote. A gun may be fired in a flash of anger, a rock carelessly hurled, a shovel swung in sudden fury, but a homicidal poisoning requires a calculating intelligence. And boy, was this calculating, although it wasn't intelligent because it was so easily unraveled, says Deborah Bloom in the Poisoner's Handbook.
As Judge Mrazek just instructed, there are 5 counts.
So when I first looked at this, I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit busy because you break them down more one by one. But you know, it's a real good catch-all here, and they sort of use the same theme throughout. Where normally I thought the slides were too busy for what I want, but he has the right rhythm and how he presents it. And these are all the kind of things that he ties them all in together beautifully. So I thought this was like the most detailed presentation I've ever seen in a criminal trial, and they made it very understandable and easy to follow the theory of the case.
And each count has a series of elements. The state has to prove each count and each element of each count beyond a reasonable doubt. That is our burden. In this closing, we will go count by count, and then within each count, element by element, to show to you how the state has met its burden of proving aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder.
So I'm going to jump ahead here. Let me highlight a few things here. But look what they show here. They'll show a little snapshot of who made the comment. So here it's Kouri and her phone calls to Jean Richins. And then when Katie arrives, what she's saying. I mean, they really broke this down with such precision. Here's her phone searches, things she's looking for that indicate she had a guilty conscience. And here's a really good thing. They had a counter clock here that shows how long it took from the time she called 911 to how long it took for her to actually do CPR, or from the time they started telling her you need to do CPR. So check this out.
You're right by your husband right now?
Yes, he's so pale. His mouth is open.
Okay, listen carefully. Are you able to lay him on the floor or the ground? On the floor, on the ground?
I'm just shaking. I can't put them. I can't.
You can do it. You can do it. You need to calm down.
He's just yellow.
We need to help them. I can guide you through CPR. Take a deep breath for me. I'm here with you.
He doesn't have a pulse.
He doesn't have a pulse.
No.
Yeah, I think someone's saying here, Queen of Hearts, I heard her mom in the background. I think that's other dispatchers taking calls. That's what I took it to mean. I mean, you'd think they would have better headsets that don't pick up all that distortion of other calls in the background, but who knows? We don't know. They didn't explain it. It does not sound like she did CPR, and that's why it's a brilliant move for the prosecutor to play this. Not only did it take so long, it looked like she was not engaged with it. It wasn't aggressively trying to save him. I mean, the dispatcher was more aggressive in trying to save him. She was all blasé about it. No big deal.
Okay, I'm here with you. I'm here with you. We need to get him help.
I mean, it sounds like a little child that's crying because they can't get their favorite toy or something. This is not a 30-something-year-old woman whose husband she found might be dead. In a frantic, get over here, get now. How long is it going to take for the ambulance to get here? To me, it's like if somebody doesn't ask how long it takes to get the ambulance there, EMT, whatever you want to call it, to me, that's automatically a red flag. And not saying something like, hurry, get them here right away. And then asking for updates on the time. I think that's what people would normally do if they're trying to save somebody they love. Or even not somebody that they don't even love. Just if somebody you come across, let's say, in public, if you're trying to help them, you would have a better sense of urgency.
If you need to put me on speaker, put me on speaker. I'm going to guide you through CPR, okay?
Here's some more details.
Very shortly after, medical examiners rolled Eric Richins' body out of his home for the last time. She told Katie that she was going to plan the Midway. She was going to follow through with the purchase of the Midway mansion. She was going to sell the home that she was living in. And she had a plan for running Eric's business, C&E. The morning of Eric's death. She had those plans in place because she knew she...
I don't think she's ever once looked at the jury. I think she's trying to avoid eye contact, and jury members pick up on that. So this was not something that they would have missed out on. She acts like she's guilty and has a guilty conscience despite her having zero emotion and being stone cold.
Was going to murder Eric. She had already thought about not only murdering him, but what I'm doing immediately after murdering him. Her plan with the Midway mansion is consistent with her dream of living there with Josh Grossman, running it as an event center, farming, and raising Eric's kids. Her plan to sell the home she lived in proves that she had no idea that home was in a trust, and she couldn't sell it.
Yeah, that was the big trap that she didn't anticipate, is that she didn't have the rights to that house. So when she killed him, she thought the windfall was going to be there. It was for life insurance, but as far as ownership of the house and the company and all that, it didn't pan out the way she thought it was. So she was going to lose that house. She killed him for nothing except for exchanging life without parole, is my prediction.
Her plan on running Eric Richins' half of C&E shows that she did not understand the buy-sell agreement, the life insurance coverage on the buy-sell agreement, or that life insurance.
So anyway, I'm not going to get too bogged down in this detail. He disproved that he committed suicide.
Illicit drugs too, in the moment.
Showed that he didn't use drugs. And look at all these different dates, comments to different people. So, I mean, this is like meticulous detail. It's very impressive. And so what we have then, Bloodworth went roughly 2 hours and 10 minutes in his closing. And then there was a motion for a mistrial by Katie Nestor, and then Wendy Lewis did the defense closing. And I thought that was probably a smarter move, because I think Nestor started getting on the jury's nerves. And so she went just over an hour and 2 minutes roughly. And so you're talking about the prosecutor's closing was more than double the defense. And then they had on top of that a 30-minute rebuttal that Brad did. So they went a total of roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes to just 1 hour and 2 minutes by the defense. So they just had so much more there. The defense was just floundering. So let's look at that. Here's another good one.
Give you money when you get paid at an extraordinary, exorbitant interest rate.
He showed that she was in the whole $1.6 million. And that's the financials. And she bounced, 236 checks the year prior. So these kind of things are very damaging. And they pretty much just bury her. All right, so then he went through the different claim details, explained the insurance fraud claim. The first one was for insurance fraud by scheme, and the other one was fraud by claim, actually submitted claim, and the third one was by a forgery, all the part of the same claim. And then he look at this. He's going into the past with this Josh Grossman, the handyman, saying how we had crazy dream, I'll divorce. I mean, Eric was not in her future, and he was worth way more dead than alive. In fact, she had no idea how much she would be hurting, obviously. But in her mind, she's set free of the life insurance, the business, and the house. She's going to be awash in millions. All right, so I'm just going to, rather than do the motion for mistrial, it was pretty much a nothing of substance. And then they had a break. Let's see here. Here's a defense argument. So I'm going to probably play all this here, the whole thing.
In the early morning hours of March 4th, 2022, the house was quiet. Kouri Richins fell asleep in her young son's room, like many parents do. At some point in the night, she gets up.
Time-wise, I think it was fine for the prosecution to go that long because they had so much to present. Defense didn't have a lot to work with, so I think it's probably appropriate. You don't want to bore them and go on hours and hours with just these ridiculous arguments that don't get you anywhere.
And walks back down the hallway to her bedroom. She slips back into bed beside her husband. She settles in next to him. She reaches over, and he feels cold.
Notice the difference right here off the bat. You notice how the contrast is between her and Brad. So Wendy's reading this kind of stuff. Why isn't she making direct eye contact with the jury?
Eric Richins, the father of her children, the man that she has built a life with. Something feels wrong.
See, right there, it's like, wait, if you're on the jury, you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, she's talking about having a life without him. And now you're making it sound like they had a life together forever because they were so in love. And it's like, none of this is what panned out at the trial. So what trial are you watching here, counsel?
She pulls the blanket up around him, but something still isn't right. He feels heavy. She turns on the light. And when she looks at her husband, really looks at him, she realizes something is terribly wrong. And in that instant, in that bedroom, in the quiet early of the morning, Kouri Richins' world collapsed.
No, in her mind, it was time to dance, celebrate, and party the night away, as we saw in film and in her own words. So right again here, it's like she's completely tone deaf, is not speaking with anything of credibility here. So she's already shot herself in the foot. I mean, everything these defense attorneys have been doing so far for this trial is it's just explained away as normal behavior, and it's not a big deal. And they don't have anything. You can't see her handing him the fentanyl, so you don't have anything.
Reasonable doubt. It's not just a slogan. It's not just a suggestion. It's a constitutional shield that protects the innocent and prevents the state from punishing without truth. And it is the state that has that high burden, the highest burden under the law, to prove each and every single element of each and every charged offense beyond a reasonable doubt. The state stood up on day one and they told you they were going to prove that Kouri Richins had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to kill Eric Richins.
I think she's got some kind of some sore throat or something going on. I just don't like it when you're advocating and you stop to take a sip of something, but I think she had to in this case.
We're going to talk about each of these, but first I want to talk a little more about reasonable doubt. I've told juries for a long time that one way to understand reasonable doubt is, are there other reasonable explanations as to what happened? As you look at the evidence, if there are other reasonable explanations, this is reasonable doubt.
And there are no other reasonable ones. So, okay, she's right on the general premise.
And you have to find Kouri not guilty. I put to you that every fact that the state has put forth to say that Ms. Richins is guilty has another reasonable explanation. Let's go back to March 3rd, 2022. From everything we've heard during this trial, Kouri and Eric were happy that night. They were celebrating. Kouri was just about to close on the Midway Mansion. Rightly or wrongly, she believed that this was going to be the deal that put her over the top.
Well, there's a concession. Rightly or wrongly, she believed it. Yeah, she was deluded and completely out to lunch, had no chance. She was going to lose that mansion no matter what happened, whether Eric's alive or they're dead. She never would have been able to make that flip work.
The deal that had made everything she'd done with her business, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all worth it. The night of March 3rd, they have a celebratory drink, they go to bed, and then Kouri hears one of her sons cry out. And like parents all over the world do, she goes in to lie down on the floor of her son's room. An alibi or the truth? She wasn't inconsistent when she told this story. She told everyone, I was lying in Ash's room. I was lying down with him. What does reason tell you? What does experience tell you? When she wakes up, she goes back to her room. Eric appears to be asleep. We don't know for sure what happens over the next 15 minutes or so. The state.
That's because my client did not testify. That's why you don't know what happened there. And she never put it down in any of her diaries or other writings or what she told other people. But her not testifying can't be held against her. So
Ask you to leap to conclusions about what she was doing during that time. Yet they have not shown you any evidence of this. They just tell you to believe it. But what does reason tell you? She gets up. She goes to the bathroom. She picks up her phone. We all pick up our phone all the time.
now, what does your reason tell you? Okay, so now you're making all innocent reasons for what she was doing, and so why don't you explain what actually happened then? You're making what she's doing is she's actually filling in 15 minutes of what Corey's telling her without Corey ever putting this out in front of the jury for them to hear this. So it's really a stretch for reasonableness, I think.
Been away from it for an hour or two. She goes to the bathroom. Maybe she walks to the kitchen. Maybe she gets a drink of water. Maybe she lets out the dog. And then she goes back to her bedroom, phone probably in hand, gets into the bed.
Maybe she did none of that. Maybe she rinsed out the cup that he drank, Moscow Mule with the fentanyl in it, and washed it down the drain.
Next to her husband, again, realizes he's cold, pulls up the blanket, realizes something's wrong, and turns on the light. It probably takes a moment or two for her brain to register what she's seen. And then
So that's a couple more minutes there. Okay, gotcha.
she makes that call that nobody ever wants to make. She calls 911. A big part of this state's case is that Ms. Richins is not grieving properly.
In this case, you really don't want to have to call 911 because it takes a great acting job, and she did a terrible, terrible job at it.
You heard this from a couple of different witnesses, 2 or 3. What does that mean? I was unexpectedly widowed when I was not much older than Kouri, and I had 2 little boys. How do you judge someone in that moment? If I've learned one thing during this trial, I've learned I didn't grieve right. I didn't know that, but it's clear now that I didn't. They want you to look at a woman.
Okay, so right here, personally vouching for your client is not appropriate argument. You're not supposed to personally vouch or put yourself into the scene of evidence, if you will. And so her making a comparison, well, I grieve the same way as Kouri did, so therefore, if it was reasonable for me to act that way when I found my husband dead, Kouri should be the same. So you're not allowed to personally vouch for that, but the prosecutor just let it go, which is probably what I would have done too. But anyway, it's just they're grasping at straws to try to make some sense here.
In the worst moment of her life, and to judge her grief. There's
You know what? You should judge somebody's grief because that's one of the most key things you do is see how somebody reacts, whether it seems it's a sincere tragedy to them or if they're actually just stone cold heartless. Okay, because if they're stone cold heartless, the jury's going to look at it and think, if they're that cold hearted, then maybe they were happy that they died. Obviously, they're not going to celebrate right in front of the EMT and police officers showing up. She waited till they left and later on that evening, the next day, to celebrate.
no wrong way to grieve. They're asking you to judge how she is acting at that moment and then use that moment of evidence of guilt.
Oh, it's evaluating the credibility of your client and the motives.
In the opening, we pointed out, and quick, go ahead and put it on that the state looks at facts one way and sees a witch. But if you look at those facts another way, you see a widow. Here's an example. Hands over her face, curled up. A witch?
Yeah, instead of like looking after her boys or frantically doing something to ensure that her husband pulls through this, that to me was like, I think, incriminating seeing that. You put your hands down on the face like that, and there was no denial that he's dying or dead. And so the first stage of grief is denial of something shocking like that. He was not on his deathbed for months or years. I mean, this is like a complete shock to her. So she should be freaking out.
Hiding because she's done something wrong, or a widow. Hiding and blocking out what has just happened to her, what has just happened to her children, what has just happened to her family and to her life.
Well, you know what? She also talked about how she was screaming to try to save him and all that kind of stuff. And none of that was on 911 call. None of it was on the body cam videos. It's some of the many lies. I mean, they did a brilliant job of flaying out all of her lies for the jury to see. Brad did.
Look familiar? Portrayals of women grieving in art. Portrayals of women in grief.
Okay. I don't know who these characters are, but, you know, this is really grasping at straws here. Okay, defense counsel. So did your client know about this? This is how grieving women act, and so therefore she knew she needed to bend over like these women? Is that where your client got the idea?
The state tells you during evidence that, oh, she didn't immediately talk to Kouri Richins when he came to the house because she felt so guilty she couldn't talk to him. Or was it because she didn't want to tell a father his son had died? Oh, she didn't tell the boys when she should have. It was weird. She didn't go talk to them. They were in the playroom. Again, because she felt guilty, or because she was dreading the most difficult conversation, the conversation nobody, no mother.
What? There was no difficulty. There wasn't a lot of stress that we see here. It's all just fakery of emotions. There's no tragic emotions bubbling up here from her. So she could have talked to Gene plain as day. Wouldn't have fazed her at all.
Ever wants to have with her young sons. Their father is dead. The father that everyone agrees was a wonderful father is gone, and she has to tell those.
Yeah, no focus on the kids. Where's the focus for the kids, huh? She yells at them, get out of the room. And that's all we hear for the longest time.
Boys, you're never going to see him again. Believe me. That conversation may be the worst moment in a mother's life. How can a woman be judged on how she handles that moment? You heard her friend Allie staking. When Allie arrived at the home that day, she said Kouri was clearly upset. She said she was distraught. This is someone who's known her since junior high, not an officer who met her 5 minutes ago. She said Kouri was acting as you would expect. That night,
I keep thinking I see staking. Ellen Meadu staking, not stalking, but you know what? I think that walk the dog letter, as I said, I think it was on my last live stream. I think this was planned in her mind, and there's nothing unusual about her. Anything strike you unusual? Like she was grieving out. Well, you know what? She was with her and never said anything about it. When she's talked about that night when they're partying and all that, dancing the night away. So this testimony was not credible at all.
friends came over to talk about Eric, to drink to Eric. A wake is what the Irish call it. The state wants you to leap to the conclusion that that night, Kouri was celebrating Eric's death.
Well, if you look at the video, you're wrong, counsel. You're absolutely wrong. She even says she was dancing the night away. I've never heard of that, dancing that away when the night your husband dies.
You heard Allie stalking. They were celebrating Eric's life. They kept it light for the boys. They were dancing, they were smiling. All of them were, even Eric's sister.
Yeah, the walk to the dog letter, I think that shows she was trying to manipulate and create a defense, and it was much later, like a year and a half after the event happened. So she was just planting testimony in other people's minds to help get an acquittal.
We not smile in our grief. They want to tell you no. But reason and experience tells you differently. Let's talk about the investigation. The investigation in this matter was nothing but sloppy. It was driven by bias.
No, I would say it's not bias. It's just a matter of they weren't detailed enough and thorough enough in it. So yeah, I would agree. You could say it's sloppy in many different respects.
Did you notice during the state's closing, they didn't really even talk about the investigation? Instead, they speculated. What was in people's heads? What were they thinking? Speculation, conjecture, not proof.
Too much reading here. She sounds a little bit angry. She has a little anger to her voice there. I think her tone is a little over the top. You want to have an impassioned plea and firmness in your voice, but I think having too much anger is just going to alienate yourself to the jury, even though they're realizing you don't have a lot to work with here.
Instead of looking at the evidence to determine what happened, the state they determined what happened, and then they found the evidence to support it. This is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you favor evidence that supports a belief and ignore evidence that contradicts it. That is how this entire case was investigated, working backwards from a conclusion.
Okay, but you know what? What was bias in what they presented in this trial? What was bias? She doesn't talk about it. She just throws that catch-all description of how the police department conducted their investigation. Excuse me. But they never came up with any details here. So that's another clue. This is just smoke and mirrors.
It started on March 4th. Detective Woody, before she's even entered the home, Amy Richin tells her they think Kouri is somehow involved. Then both Katie and Amy Richins tell Detective Woody they think this is because she recently found out about a trust Eric created. Immediately, this influenced this.
Yeah, there's so much commentary. There's no direct link to fentanyl. She's going to walk. They don't have the case, even though circumstantially you just don't have it. But you know what? It doesn't need to be fentanyl exactly. It could be any drug. The thing is, she got a street drug, and she wanted as powerful as it can be to kill Eric. And that's all that matters. It doesn't matter whether it's fentanyl or whatever. If you look at the elements of the crime, the elements never said anything about fentanyl, right? Is a set of poison. So whatever the poison is, she can't use that as a defense. Well, I only meant it to be oxycodone, or I meant it to be something other than propofol and this other stuff. So anyway, let's go ahead here.
Investigation. But what happened that first day? They found nothing to support foul play. Kouri tells them he was a user of THC gummies, that maybe he used one that night. They never ask where the gummies are. They do a cursory search of the bedroom and bathroom. They admit that they don't look in places where the gummies were found a month later, high up in the bathroom, high above the refrigerator, high up in the laundry room, somewhere in a pocket of either Croer or Eric's jacket in a closet. All places where they would have been put out of reach of children. But they didn't find any of them that day. You know what else they didn't do? They didn't secure the scene. They moved things around. They told you they didn't have probable cause to search the whole house. We couldn't search the whole house. All we could do was
Yeah, despite that, there was still overwhelming evidence of guilt for your client.
look in the bedroom and the bathroom. But they could have asked for consent. Kouri gave them consent when they asked to search one place outside of the bedroom. The entire house could have been searched that day, but they didn't do it. They didn't even ask. What else happens that morning? Officer Nguyen, he does not little, but his death checklist. He says, did he have any history of prescription abuse? Did he have any history of illicit drug use? And what does Kouri tell him? No. How easy would it have been to just say yes? If she had just killed him with illicit drugs, why in the name of God did she just not say yes? Had she said yes, we probably wouldn't all be sitting here today. She didn't say yes because she did not know how he had died.
Well, but you know what? Maybe she didn't know what street drug it was for sure, but she trusted that it was more potent. So whether it was fentanyl or propofol or whatever, the bottom line is she wanted it potent enough. And if she would have said, oh, by the way, I think he took such and such, automatically the cops are going to focus in on, well, how do you know that? How did he get it? And then what are they going to do? They're going to trace it back to her directly. So that's why she didn't say that.
Over the last 4 years, they've gone back to that house 10 more times. And they still can't tell you what happened the early morning of March 4th, 2022. 10 warrants, that's a lot. That's not typical. They were still searching for evidence on February 9th of this year, 2 weeks before trial. 4 years of investigation. And they are still trying to find evidence to make their case because they know they don't have enough. They're still trying to prove Kouri Richins guilty.
Trying to prove it. I think they should still follow up on other leads. So should have been a tighter investigation. Should have they gone in with a better view of this is possibly spousal homicide? Absolutely. But in the end, they did sufficient work to get this conviction and also the help of the PI.
So let's talk about Todd Gabler. In comes Todd Gabler, the private investigator.
Yeah.
Jeff O'Driscoll told you, well, he was an investigator for the estate. Just the civil case. Seriously? He's putting trackers on the car of Kouri, her mother, her brother. He's trying to track Carmen Lober's car. He's providing evidence to the police. Detective Woody testified that this information from the private investigator is what helped advance their investigation.
Well, good that he made a difference in the case. That's good.
He testified he was in the house alone numerous times, finding things the police didn't, not using gloves, calling law enforcement when he found things. He said he didn't need a babysitter while he did all
when he found things, he's not planting things.
These things, which is different than what Clint Benson told you. He said nobody was ever in that house without me being there. That wasn't true. What he told you wasn't true. Todd Gabler was in and out of that house numerous times by himself. He also told you that he was completely fair and unbiased, testing 2 hypotheses. His hypotheses, suicide and homicide. He ignored any others, including accident. And how did he handle this unbiased testing of hypotheses? You heard Josh Grossman. He said the first time he talked to Todd Gabler said right out of the gate, Kouri killed Eric. Josh told you that tainted what he thought of next. How does it not taint an interview when your opening line is, oh, Kouri killed Eric, so now let's tell me what you have, what you know. Josh told you he started looking back at things differently than he had before because of that. Like I said, he tracked Kouri's car, he tracked her family's car, he tracked Carmen.
Kouri's not looking like she has been throughout most of the trial, where she's looking pretty smug and her dismissive look, her eye rolls, those kind of things. She's really changed here. I think she realizes that these attorneys aren't going to be able to do any tricks to get out of this conviction.
His Lober car. He didn't track Cody Wright's car. He had more to gain from Eric's death than anyone. He didn't track anyone involved in the civil case regarding the trust. He only tracked people that he thought might lead to information for law enforcement. Did he follow up on Eric's trip to Mexico shortly before the death? No. Did he go to Mexico? Did he try and figure out where Eric had been in Sonora, Mexico?
He didn't need to because he found it from your client getting it from Carmen.
No. Nothing about that investigation was unbiased. Nothing. He passed it all on to law enforcement. And then what he did is he said to law enforcement, you should talk to Carmen Lober.
Yeah, we know it wasn't from Mexico. You're right, says Nano. Every mention of Mexico after the walk the dog letter was allowed in was a terrible mistake by the defense. Yeah, because we know it was contrived, that it didn't come from there. The defense, Kouri didn't believe that. So, yeah, it's all manufactured defense here.
She's on the ropes in drug court. This would be a really good time to interview her because she would be very likely to be compliant at this time. Everything about this investigation was led by the Richins family. They started on day one and they continued until trial. They are the ones who initially hired and paid for experts. Their private investigator gave the information to the police. You know, and by the way, Gabler testified that he followed all the rules of being a private investigator.
Carrie Mache saying, why didn't Kouri get her own investigator? Yeah, well, they could have asked the court to appoint one, but apparently they didn't.
And that may very well be true. But he doesn't have to operate under the Constitution. There's a reason that we have rights under the Constitution. There is a reason that law enforcement has to get warrants to enter your home, to take electronics, to search your house. It is to protect the citizens of our country. It is to protect the innocent. Sidestepping these important constitutional rights by hiring a private investigator who then let law enforcement know what to do taints this entire investigation. And you know what? That is terrifying. It's terrifying. If someone has enough money to hire a PI, they can circumvent our...
All right. So she's trying to get, I guess, class jealousy here that, oh, the Richins have so much money that they can afford to hire an investigator and most of us can't. And so it makes it unfair. And this guy's going to trample on constitutional rights. He has to act as a part of a defense team, a lawyer team. So he can't do anything illegal or inappropriate. And he didn't. So she's just making a lot of hay here over nothing. And she is yelling at the jurors much of this time. It's getting a little bit over the top here because it's going on for so long. And you know what? If you're really angry like this about something that's injustice, do you really have to look down and read at your notes to what you have to act angry about?
Constitutional rights, dig into every aspect of our rights, of our lives, and turn it over to police. We have a constitution for a reason. It's to protect us all.
What did he do that was so unconstitutional? She's just talking in platitudes here, outraged over nothing that's detailed here.
I want to talk about the lead investigator, Jeff O'Driscoll. Here's what he testified that his investigation consisted of. He got assigned to the case sometime in March of 2023. He got a search warrant for some medical records. He thinks he got a search warrant for a couple of cell phones. He interviewed Chelsea Barney, where they discovered that they were wrong about some text messages. Law enforcement was wrong with what they thought they were looking for. He interviewed someone named Jake Sorensen, who must not have had anything important to say because we never heard from him. Then he interviews Carmen Lober.
Think about it. She's not discredited any single witness for the prosecution at this point. She's not exposed any kind of flaws in their testimony. It's just all this generalized commentary that's just basically she's spinning her wheels in mud.
Because he was told to by the private investigator. That's it. That was the investigation. He didn't investigate any other leads. He didn't attempt to corroborate information, particularly in the letter that we saw that Kouri wrote to her mother, the walk the dog letter. Now, he told you he didn't need to corroborate that because he didn't get that letter till after Kouri was arrested. So, I guess the state was done. You wouldn't want to start looking for things that might show her innocent. You've arrested her. Interestingly, they were still executing search warrants. They were still trying to find evidence for guilt, but they weren't looking at any evidence that might show innocence. It is absolutely possible that everything she said in that letter was true. In fact, at least 3 things in that letter were corroborated by the state's own witnesses. But they didn't investigate it. Again, ignore what might contradict your theory. Confirmation bias, reasonable doubt. Also remember that letter never went to anyone. So it was nothing more than thoughts on paper. That's all that letter was.
Thoughts on
What else did
paper.
he do? He didn't.
It was supposed to go to somebody, obviously, instructions on how to create the drugs. The fentanyl drug came from Mexico scenario. So it was basically soliciting her family to lie about Eric. So that's obstruction of justice in essence.
Interview the person Eric was talking to in Mexico the night of his death, and we'll come back to that, but he didn't follow up on that. He said that. I didn't follow up on where Eric went in Mexico or who he was communicating with in Mexico when he was there. He didn't investigate what Eric did or where he went on February 14th, 2022. He didn't follow up to see did Eric go to the hospital that day. In fact, he did nothing regarding that day. Nothing. What else? He didn't find fentanyl anywhere. Allegedly,
It was all in Eric's gut, right? Just like the detective said, he had a boatload there.
there were 90 to 120 pills of something. At least oxycodone. Where were they? I guess somebody took them, but they didn't have them. So whatever pills Carmen may or may not have provided to Kouri were gone. They no longer existed. They couldn't find or test those pills. And we do know that she bought oxycodone, but you know what? There was no oxycodone in Eric's stomach that night.
What about her Seroquel?
So instead, Detective O'Driscoll says, well, we wanted to corroborate Carmen's story. I mean, we were going to corroborate it. We weren't just going to go by it. The story that they fed her, they want to corroborate the truth. They wanted to corroborate a story. Again, let's find what confirms our theory. Let's ignore what doesn't.
She keeps talking about how they had this bias against her, and they just did anything they could to look for things that supported their conclusion. You know, they were looking for things that they followed the evidence where it led them. Some things were dead ends, but other things were legitimate.
Confirmation bias. Reasonable doubt. Sitting here in this courtroom after 4 years of investigation, there was an awful lot that O'Driscoll just could not tell you. Things he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember what people had told him in interviews. For example, he was asked, did you interview Eric's allergy doctor? Well, yes, but I can't remember what he said. Well, that might have been important because he testified the EpiPens in the house belonged to the children. Well, maybe because Eric had recently used his a couple of weeks earlier when he had an allergic reaction. He said, well, if I could have a few minutes, I could find out what was said. I could give you more information. We were in trial. He was on the stand 4 years after Eric had died. 3 years after he'd been appointed as lead investigator. And either he wasn't prepared to testify or he just didn't know.
There's O'Driscoll, detective. Behind him is one of the attorneys for Kouri initially at her preliminary hearing some time ago, and her and the other guy got conflicted out. So
he is the lead investigator. Now the state elicited testimony from him.
And I remember seeing her. We were watching her and being interviewed on 20/20 or 40 Hours or something, and she was saying, you know, unless you can directly connect Kouri to the fentanyl, the state has a problem, or worse to that effect. So state was able to prove that through circumstantial evidence.
How could he possibly know the entire case? It's just too much. I couldn't know all of that information. But he's the one they put on. He's the one they relied on. to testify about this investigation. You didn't hear from anyone else about the last 3 years of that investigation. They chose him.
Oh, yes. Sky is her name, I believe.
You know what else he couldn't testify to? He couldn't testify how the fentanyl got into Eric's system. He said, well, he ingested it. There was no evidence, none, that fentanyl was put in a drink. That was argument. Argument is not evidence. And they waited until closing to tell you, oh, she put it in a drink, without any evidence to back that.
It's circumstantial, and where she put it in the drink, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is the stuff she bought wound up in Eric's stomach.
Up. Okay, she made him a drink that night, but that's it. She made him a drink. There's no evidence that fentanyl was in that drink. And the lead detective who couldn't tell you anything, he sat through this entire trial. He heard every witness testify. He had an opportunity to form his answers or reform his answers based on what he knew other people had said. And yet he still didn't know the evidence.
Yeah, he was not very sharp on details. I'll give you that.
I want to talk a minute about deleted texts and the phone searches just quickly. Deleted texts. They said there were deleted texts off Kouri's phone, and that it looks like that probably was true. Why would you delete texts off your phone? Maybe because you were having an affair over the last 2 years. You might want to delete that off your phone before your whole husband's family finds out about it.
Well, maybe it has to do with things that the FBI can obtain from your phone and all those kind of searches about them coming after you in a prosecution. That's what it was done for. Why would anybody else have access to her phone other than law enforcement?
Maybe because she was buying oxycodone. I mean, she asked Carmen for pain pills. Doesn't mean she killed her husband, but you probably want that off of your phone. The phone searches. So the evidence shows.
So you probably wanted that off your phone. So looking for oxycodone for your husband. So that's why you're going to delete this stuff. Okay.
That Kouri found out on April 13th that Eric died of a fentanyl overdose. And that's the day they took her phone and she gets a new phone. These searches are all done on that new phone. Searches of how much fentanyl does it take to kill someone, or how much fentanyl is a lethal overdose? I don't remember exactly. Yeah, because she just found out her husband died of a lethal overdose of fentanyl. You might want to know what that means. And she texted other things. They said, oh, she texted about women's prisons. Of course she's worried. An innocent person would be worried. Anyone would be worried if they just found out that they are a suspect in a homicide investigation.
If you don't have any guilty things on your phone, you wouldn't be worried about it. So jury's not buying that.
She would have been scared to death. She was looking for information based on what she found out after Eric died. All right, what do we know about those last few hours before Eric's death? It's not a lot, but we do know some things from the autopsy and the toxicology reports. We know that he had fentanyl in both his blood and his stomach. We know he had quetiapine and alcohol only in his stomach and not his blood. So this means the quetiapine had to be taken after the fentanyl. Had they been taken together, they would have both been in his blood. We know there was no histamine response, no anaphylaxis. So he had not had an allergic reaction to anything in his body that night, including fentanyl. The state wants you to believe that the allergic reaction he had on February 14th was to fentanyl. If he had an allergic reaction on February 14th, he would have had one again 3 weeks later. Now, I know the toxicologist testified, well, you don't have an allergic reaction every time, and you can look at her testimony, but it was a little bit hard to understand, but I believe she was talking about, you might eat peanuts for a lot of times and then have an allergic reaction, and then it starts. Once you have an allergic reaction to something, it doesn't typically go away. We know he had norfentanyl in his body. And this is because his body had started to metabolize the fentanyl.
She's just really not making any points that are landing anywhere this whole time now. So it's 5:03. She's going on since 4:37.
State's toxicologist told you that the fentanyl could have been left over from a previous use. That was a possibility. Another reasonable possibility.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't agree with that because the amount he had, there's no way that would be lingering in his stomach. It would have killed him within minutes or less.
Fentanyl was there from a previous use. That was the evidence. That is reasonable doubt. What else do we know from the ME and the toxicologist? Well, we know that the fentanyl was not put in a drink. And how do we know this? There was only fentanyl in the blood and not alcohol. The state's toxicologist leaned toward the fact that maybe Eric didn't even drink alcohol, that the alcohol in his stomach was post-mortem decomposition. But the other scenario that she said that was possible was that Eric took the fentanyl, then took the quetiapine, had a small amount of alcohol. She testified that it would take 15 to 60 minutes for fentanyl to make its way into the blood. That alcohol takes 15 to 30 minutes to make its way into the blood. So if the alcohol and fentanyl were taken together, they both would have been there at the same time in the blood. But just the fact that one reasonable possibility is that the fentanyl was taken before the quetiapine and the alcohol gives you reasonable doubt that it was placed in a drink an hour earlier. Now the state's saying, well, maybe she put it in a non-alcoholic drink. So their celebratory drink maybe didn't have alcohol in it. There's no evidence of that, but they're throwing around a lot of theories. Why is that? Because they don't have one. They don't know what happened. Dr. Christensen and Dr. Ulmer testified that the manner of death could not be determined. This is really important. Dr. Christensen testified the ME's office didn't know enough about Eric's history to determine if it was an accident. They also didn't have enough information to determine it was a homicide. The ME had at least a reasonable doubt as to the cause of death.
You know, just think of the comparison, all those slides that Brad Bloodworth had, and she's got nothing to show for it. She's up there less than half the time. And she doesn't really have any slides. She's not pinpointing a lot of details on who said what and what shows reasonable doubts. So it's just a broad brush that she's trying to cloak this argument in, and she's not landing any points. She's not scoring any points.
ME isn't held to the high standard that the state is. And there was no evidence that the autopsy couldn't have been amended at a later date if additional information was received. The ME testified, excuse me, the ME didn't tell you that they couldn't amend the autopsy. He just told you they didn't. What else didn't they do? Why didn't they do a hair follicle test? Dr. Christensen said, well, we don't do that unless we're asked to. Who would you be asked to do that by? Law enforcement. Again, Summit County was only looking for evidence to confirm their theory. Evidence to support that Kouri was behind Eric's death. They did not want to look for evidence that contradicted that theory. Had they done that test, we might have our answer. Confirmation bias. All right, let's start with the means. The state did not and cannot prove that Kouri ever purchased fentanyl.
Earthann, you're saying I'm so glad the jury thought differently. I was surprised it only took 3 hours, though. I thought for sure it would take a couple days. I said it should come back quick, and that's what they did. I mean, it's a strong case, so why are they going to sit around a couple days? And this is like such a waste of time, this whole defense, and it was proven by them coming back around 3 hours later. Excuse me.
Carmen Lober. Interestingly, they barely mentioned Carmen Lober in their closing. The only witness who can put fentanyl into Kouri's hand. Let's talk about her testimony. Admittedly, a lot of it was painful to watch. And in some ways, she's sympathetic. But she is looking at multiple long prison sentences. And her only way out, her only way was to testify at this trial. But what she could not do was put fentanyl in Kouri Richins' hands. She told you that she had no memory of what actually took place in 2022. During those interviews, she told detectives over and over again, my brain is fried. I've been using drugs since 6th grade. My memory is gone. So what she testified to you wasn't what she remembered. She admitted on the stand that what she testified to is what she had been shown.
Just too much anger. Tone it down there, Wendy. You're coming on too strong.
Had been told. Detective O'Driscoll told you that Carmen Lober could not remember the purchase of drugs after Eric had died. When asked by Ms. Nestor if at least one of the times that Carmen allegedly purchased drugs from Mr. Croer and brought them to Kouri was after Eric's death, his response was, her testimony was not that. She didn't remember it that way. We found digital evidence that supported that. But you know what? She did testify to that. She testified at length and in detail about something that even Detective O'Driscoll said she didn't remember.
I think a lot of jurors, you run the risk when you just talk this way to the jurors where you're actually like scolding them. They actually just tune you out. I think that's what she's running the risk of doing here. They just tune her out and they just know she's just blistering and making nonsensical comments just because she's supposed to do that. So they're just thinking of other things like, okay, how soon are we going to get this? And are we going to be able to get a verdict out today? Or they're thinking of other things that have nothing to do with the case. That's when you run the risk of.
Carmen Lober was not able to tell you that she bought fentanyl. She agreed on the stand that it was the detectives that first put the word fentanyl in her mouth.
Do you think Kouri's satisfied with the job of this attorney of hers? Or is she realizing, you know what, it's not making any sense? she's just talking a lot of smoke and mirrors.
In her head. She was told by detectives in this case that she bought fentanyl. Eric died of fentanyl. You bought drugs. You bought fentanyl. She took that story and she ran with it because she had everything to lose. And Detectives O'Driscoll and Detective Maynard told her, you are getting a big, giant get-out-of-jail-free card. And what do you have to do to get that big, giant get-out-of-jail-free card? Give them the details that will ensure Kouri gets convicted.
That's sort of cheesy.
Convicted of murder. You heard that from O'Driscoll's own mouth. He tried to explain it away. But he went in and he told this woman, get out of jail free card, give us the details to ensure Kouri gets convicted of murder. She had to tell them that. She had to tell you that. She had to say she purchased fentanyl. The detectives walked into those interviews.
Yeah, well, you know what? They did not make it up based on the suggestion of law enforcement. So it was credible enough. They were folks with questionable character, questionable testimony, but there's enough there to show that's where Kouri got the drugs for a reasonable jury to find that's the case.
It's not to find out what happened, but to get Ms. Lober to confirm what they already had decided happened. Again, confirmation bias. She told them at that first interview, I literally never dealt with fentanyl. And she had reason not to deal with fentanyl. She told you that. She had a daughter who had overdosed from fentanyl. She was afraid of fentanyl. She told them that Kouri asked for something for an investor's bad back. Maybe it was for Eric. But she told them that Kouri asked for an investor's bad back. And that later she asked for something stronger. She asked for the Michael Jackson drug. She told them Kouri never asked for fentanyl. She admitted that she got the word fentanyl from Detectives O'Driscoll and Maynard. She told them she couldn't remember. She asked them to lay it out for her, to put the pieces of the puzzle together, to write it down, and I'll sign it. They argued that was because, well, she didn't want to write it in her cell. That's why they wanted us to write it. Well, she could have written it right there at the table, I suppose. But you know what else? Remember? She also told the assistant United States attorney basically the same thing. Put it together for me. And the U.S. attorney or the assistant U.S. attorney said, oh, we don't do it that way. You have to tell us what you remember. They literally offered a big giant get out of jail free card.
There it is again. All right.
And the state's
Cool.
last question.
You know, what about you getting that statement all typed up for the guy that sold Carmen the drugs? That 2-page type statement that you had him sign, you had it typed up before you came to the jail. So you've done something worse than anything the prosecutor did, and your client definitely has done a lot worse than anything you're trying to accuse the prosecution of doing.
To Detective O'Driscoll, they brought up the TV show, The House of Cards, but who held all of the cards in this case? Jeff O'Driscoll told you. Carmen Lober held all of the cards. Their entire house of cards is being held up by her. And now at trial 3 years later, she comes in here and says she bought oxycodone once and fentanyl 3 times. Oh, she had her story down. She told it very nicely on direct. But when pressed, she couldn't remember anything. Not from 2022, not from 2023. She couldn't remember on Friday what she testified to on Thursday. And you know, I didn't ask her about her mental health or her learning disability to be mean. I asked her because it explains why she was so easily convinced by law enforcement as to what she needed to do and what she needed to say. She described her learning disability as low education. Well, you can decide what that means for yourself, but one possibility is she has an intellectual disability. And if that is the case, she is more vulnerable to suggestibility than most people. Easy to manipulate. And they took advantage of this. We all saw it. They did too, but they had to find someone who would confirm their theory. But you know what? Through all of this, there were a handful of things that Carmen Lober was consistent about. There were a few. Kouri asked for some pain medication. Kouri said that in the walk the dog letter. Then she told you, I brought oxycodone from Susan Kohler on February 11th. Prescription oxycodone. Now that's important because if Kouri had any pain pills before February 14th, these were likely what she had. She said Kouri never asked for fentanyl. She said that in all of her interviews. Carmen never asked Robert Crozier for fentanyl. She said that. She was consistent with that. That she bought pills from Robert Crozier. That the pills she got from him were light green, 15 to 20 milligram oxycodone pills. When she bought from him again, she asked for more of the same. Those are the things she said throughout. Everything she said, every other thing she said has changed multiple times. It changed again while she was on the stand. Now she says the number of purchases were more. That changed. The date changed. For the first time, she says that Crozier was the first one to say the word fentanyl. It's the first time we've heard that. Wasn't in the interviews.
None of this is ripping the jury.
She's not a truthful person. There were a couple of little things she lied on the stand about. Not super important, but I'm going to point them out because they were just untruths. When I asked her if she was on any medication for her anxiety or any other illnesses, she said no. But then later, when Mr. Bloodworth asked her, she said yes, she was on medications. They were in her car in her purse. She told you Nancy Peterson drove to buy the drugs because she didn't have a driver's license. When we showed her that photo was reversed and that she was driving, did you notice how smoothly that story changed? Oh, well, yeah, I drove one way, she drove the other. By the way, where's Nancy Peterson? There was someone who might have been able to confirm Carmen's story, but we didn't hear from her. What else did Carmen lie about? She said on that stand, and she told you, I never violated drug court after I got out, my get out of jail free card in May of 2023. But then when confronted, she had to admit, oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah,
that's right.
She did. She admitted to the
She
lying.
told you, well, I was holding a can of alcohol, but I didn't drink it. When confronted, though, she had to admit that wasn't true. She said on the stand, and she told you that. Oh, I just held it. Oh, but you told. You're a probation officer, you drank it? Oh, yeah, I guess I drank it. But what's the most important thing she admitted to lying to? She lied to a judge. She lied to a judge by writing a letter saying that she had been 100% compliant with drug court. And why did she lie to that judge?
That's a good point. You got that exposed, so good job there. But bottom line is there's too much connection with her and Kouri and the drugs.
She wanted to go to Vegas. And she told you on the stand, she admitted it. Yeah, I was untruthful with the judge to get something that I wanted. She was untruthful because she wanted to go to Vegas. There is a lot more at stake here than going to Vegas. She is, again, being untruthful to get what she wants. And what she wants this time is to stay out of prison. And she will say whatever she needs to make that happen. You know what else she got by telling that story? In addition to her get out of jail free card, she also got an advance straight to go and pass drug court on the way card. No more showing up at drug court. And she told you drug court's tough, but she didn't have to go anymore. No regular check-ins. She just had to text hi or Lober to Detective Maynard. And most importantly, no more drug tests. She's still on probation, still waiting to go to court to see if her charges will be dismissed. And she's not being drug tested. Is she telling you the truth about being clean? We have absolutely no way to know.
Okay.
She got everything she wanted by testifying to things that she admitted she had no memory of. Can you feel for Carmen Lober? You can. Can you believe
All the flaws you see with Carmen and her testimony, that's the very reason why she is a good one to buy drugs off of. That's why people that have money to buy the drugs, people that are wealthy, they'll go to folks like them because they know they won't have any credibility if they ever get busted.
her beyond a reasonable doubt? You cannot. And if you can't believe her beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to find Kouri Richins not guilty. I want to talk about Robert Croer because he's also an addict and he also changed his story. But what makes him different? First, his original story was given in a 13-minute interview while he was coming down from drugs, not in 10 hours of interviews over multiple days. Detectives came in and they told him he sold fentanyl. They said, we know you sold fentanyl. You just need to confirm it. We won't jam you up. Just tell us you sold fentanyl. And he agreed with them. And they asked, did Carmen Lober know she got fentanyl? And he said, absolutely. But what did he explain to you on the stand? Now that he's been through rehab, now that we know he's sober, he gave people what they asked for when he was selling drugs. He always gave them what they asked for. So when detectives came in and said, well, you sold Carmen fentanyl, Carmen asked for fentanyl, he said, yes. He said, what I meant is, if that's what she asked for, that's what I gave her. What else makes him different, though, from Carmen Lober? He changed his story from what the prosecution wanted him to say to what they didn't want him to say, not the other way around. Why do this? Why would he risk his immunity? It would have been so much easier for him just to stick with his original story. But let's go back. So he gives that original story in April of 23. He sobers up. He meets with the state. He meets with Mr. Bloodworth in April of 25 before he ever spoke to me or to Mr. Berman. And he tells them at that time that he got it wrong. He says, no, I sold Carmen oxycodone, not fentanyl. And how does he know this? He told you. Because he didn't start selling fentanyl until late 2022. And he sold to Carmen Lober in early 2022. Also, his source gave him fentanyl that was so dark it was almost purple. It wasn't light green. It wasn't light blue. Okay, so then he meets with our team in October of 25. He says the same thing. He signed an affidavit swearing it to be true.
Yeah, the affidavit. that you guys created in your own law office and then went to the jail and had them signed? That has zero credibility.
Testified to the same thing at trial. I was only selling Oxy in 2022. And not only that, he told you it was prescription Oxy from a pharmacy. So not fake Oxy that was actually fentanyl, but real Oxy. And he was a bit of an expert on the topic. I think he knew more than the drug expert did. He told you, light green pills, those were 15 to 20 milligram pills. Light blue pills, those were 30 milligram pills. His prescription was 10 milligram pills. He knew his stuff. He was a pretty successful drug dealer. And he told you when I sold fentanyl, those pills were almost purple. What did he have to gain by testifying to this? He's never met Kouri Richins. He'd never met Eric Richins. He didn't know Carmen. He isn't getting anything from anyone. It's for these reasons that his testimony is more credible than Carmen's.
All street drugs had fentanyl in them back then, so he can't claim this. Oh, they just showed up later.
Her freedom is at stake, so she had to say fentanyl. She has to give them Kouri. He has nothing to gain. He just told you the truth. The state told you in closing that they traced the fentanyl. It's absolutely not true. Carmen never even looked at those pills. She didn't test those pills. She didn't take any of them, according to her.
Circumstantially, they proved it, though. You're wrong, Ms. Lewis.
And we don't know where any of them are. Where are these some odd 90 to 120 pills? They didn't trace that fentanyl. We have no idea where that is. They didn't trace any fentanyl. So how did Eric end up ingesting fentanyl? What other reasonable explanation might there be? You know, I'm not going to stand here and say to you that Eric Richins was a drug addict. He wasn't a Carmen Lober. He wasn't a Robert Croer. I don't think the evidence shows that. But that doesn't mean he didn't use. That doesn't mean he didn't ask Kouri to get him pain pills. He probably did. So what do we know? We know Eric was in pain. He had Lyme disease, which can be very painful. He had back pain. He had knee pain. We know he'd been in Mexico not long before his death. Look at what he was doing right before his death. So right before his death, he's texting Pedro Sonora, back and forth, back and forth. Did they interview him? Like we said, no. He texts his friend Scott Wagner, more, Pedro Sonora, from 8:30, between 8:30 and 8:36, he texts him 1, 2, 3, well, these are back and forth. But between them, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 texts. He gets a call from Scott Wagner. What's his last Google search? How far is it from Scottsdale to Nogales? And then he gets a text from Raul. We also don't know anything about Raul. Maybe he made other calls. The state said maybe Kouri was calling on the Wi-Fi. Maybe so was he. We don't know who else he talked to, but this is what we do know. Oh, which this is a good place to bring up, I think, that the state did stand up here and they told you that we said things in opening that didn't come in during trial, and that's true. Strategies change during trial. But remember,
I'm surprised she admitted that. I've never seen an attorney admit that.
we are not the ones under an obligation to put on any evidence. It's not us. We're not under an obligation to prove anything. It's them. Okay, so what else do we find on that first day that Eric died? What else do they find? The hydrocodone bottle. Whatever happened to that bottle? Why wasn't it tested? What was kept in that bottle? The bottle sitting right by the bed on Eric's nightstand, right next to his phone and watch that were placed neatly in his charger. An expired prescription bottle with nothing in it but residue. And you can see the residue there. Why would that be sitting out? a 6-year-old prescription bottle. What might be the best way to bring illegal pills back from Mexico? Put them in a prescription bottle? Put them in your suitcase? What might be the best?
Gosh, this directly contradicts again the walk the dog letter, where she's suggesting how Eric had drugs coming in from Mexico. So it's such a weak point, but I guess they don't have anything else, so that's what they're stuck with. So Eric was a fentanyl user. Go on down the line of things he has for character flaws, and that's what defense is trying to use. They're attacking the victim here.
Way to store your illicit oxycodone? Stick them in a prescription bottle? Put them by your bed? And now that bottle's gone, and nobody knows where it is, and nobody tested it. And you saw that white powder, and you can look back when you go back, but you saw that white powdery residue on the nightstand next to Eric. Nobody tested that either. So what's another explanation? What could have happened? Eric was about to take his last pain pill out of that bottle that he kept by the side of his bed. He's on the phone with people in Mexico. He's checking how long it takes to drive from Scottsdale to Nogales. Maybe he knew he was getting fentanyl in Mexico. Maybe he thought it was something else, and he accidentally got fentanyl. Maybe had they tested that bottle, we would know. But they didn't. You know what else we know, though? We know he had a prescription for naltrexone, and it appears he wasn't taking it. A drug used to help people control craving for drugs and alcohol. It's not a drug used to treat Lyme disease. There's a reasonable alternative. Reasonable doubt. All right, I'm going to move to motive. The state absolutely did not prove that Kouri's relationship with Josh Grossman was a motive to kill her husband. Josh and Kouri had been seeing each other on and off for about 2 years. You heard from Josh. He testified that their future together was a fantasy. That at no time did Kouri ever lead him to believe that she was going to leave Eric for him.
Sure she did.
It was clear that Josh loved Kouri more than she loved him. You could see it in his face. You could see it in his demeanor. You can look at the text shortly before Eric died where Kouri was trying to...
There you go. She had no visible effects of emotion on any of this, except when it had to do with financials. Seeing autopsy photos of Eric, not going to affect her emotions. Seeing this guy be brokenhearted because of her, no, nothing there either.
Break up with him. The state wants you to find that the conversation Kouri had with Josh about his time in Iraq is somehow evidence or proof of murder. But Josh told you she was grieving, that conversation was about life and death and Eric and bow hunting and the supernatural, that it really didn't even seem that unusual at the time. He only thought it seemed unusual when the private investigator told him Kouri killed Eric. It's not evidence of a homicide. It isn't proof of anything. Yes, they were having an affair. Eric was also having an affair, possibly more than one.
You know,
heard there was a text about an open relationship. And
more than one, really. Where do you get that from? And all that came out was maybe an emotional affair. So that's not accurate here. So trashing the victim, not a good move.
You can laugh about that, but that's what the text said. And you know what? We do not bring this up to make Eric out to be a bad person. It doesn't matter what he was doing in his personal life. That's not the point. The point is that there were parts of Eric's life that he didn't share with people. Just like he didn't share with Cody that he used marijuana, or even that he took prescriptions. The point is we all have secrets, and Eric had secrets. But back to Josh, the best...
So what's your client's secret here?
Evidence that Josh was not a motive for Kouri to kill her husband is that after Eric died, she never did get together with Josh. She didn't show up at the brunch that they planned to celebrate the closing on the Midway Mansion. She didn't go on a vacation with him in April. She never even finished paying for that vacation. Josh told you that Kouri changed after Eric's death, that she was grieving, that he saw less and less of her, and ultimately she broke things off. And by the way, if Kouri was as motivated by money as they would have you think, would she really have killed her wealthy husband to run off with the handyman who lived for free in one of her houses? That doesn't fit with the state's theory.
She needed him to help fix up the house, so she was willing to lead him on. And potentially he was a suspect that way too.
The state says, look at texts. Replace the words in them with different words. They stood here and made up what was inside people's heads, what they were thinking. The state has to rely on evidence. They have to prove their case, and they can't do that. The state did not prove that Kouri killed Eric in order to be with Josh. All right, money. Money's a motive for a lot of things for a lot of people. Was Kouri a brilliant businesswoman? No. Was her business struggling? Yes, it was. Was there fake it till you make it? There seemed to be a lot of that going on. Brooke Carrington testified that money was not a priority to Kouri Richins. She could have used an accountant, she said. She didn't even use QuickBooks. And this is all true. A young mother trying to run a business, like most young mothers, young working mothers, did her accounting take a back seat to her family? Probably. The state also wants you to believe that Kouri was cheating her best friend, but that's not what the evidence showed. The evidence showed that the $45,000 that Chelsea gave to Kouri was not earmarked for closing. Kouri could do whatever she wanted with that money.
That quit claim deed or warranty deed, I think it was, that's worthless. It's not worth the paper it's written on. So she thought she bought the house. So she's completely misleading the testimony from Chelsea.
All that mattered was that when she went to that closing on that house, that she showed up with $45,000. It didn't have to be that $45,000. It could have been $45,000 she expected to come in from another flip. But then Kouri was arrested and never got the opportunity to do that. That's why that house foreclosed. But you know what the evidence has shown? That Kouri, rightly or wrongly,
it was a scam. So everything that looks bad for Kouri, they just put a spin on it. None of this is credible.
Truly believed that that Midway mansion was going to turn everything around. They were celebrating that night. If Kouri was going to kill Eric for money, she certainly would not have done it on the night that she believed she had just secured a multi-million-dollar property.
But that's what she said she was doing. We saw it on video. So right here, it's just such a ridiculous comment for the attorney to make. You've lost all credibility by making comments like that. The jury doesn't believe a word you say.
And if you look at the state's exhibit 624D, you will see that Kouri actually made a profit on every single home that she flipped. She had reason to believe that she was going to make a profit on this one too. All the foreclosures, those were all after her arrest. And something else, they say it would have cost way more money than she had to rehab the mansion to live in it with Josh, which again, Josh said it was fantasy. That wasn't going to happen. But if you don't believe him, look at text. Look at State's Exhibit 2-17D on page 33. This is where she and Eric are going back and forth on how much it would cost to rehab the mansion. And he says, we can't afford that. We don't even have time for that. And what does she tell him? And you can look at it. I don't have it word for word. She tells them, no, we're not doing that. I just need money. I just need to give the numbers I need to the investors. She didn't intend to rehab.
Yeah, she intended to rehab it. Of course she did.
Yeah, that she intended to flip it. After
that $4 million estimated cost to fix it up, was this a throwaway number? Why would you want to know that number if it wasn't your intent to flip it?
A little cleanup. All right, I want to talk about the gifts that the state talked about in their opening and throughout trial.
She just said, no, we're not going to do that because she didn't want him putting the brakes on it. She didn't want Eric shutting it down.
They made such a fuss about these. They were accessed on Kouri's phone on March 4th, the morning of March 4th. They were tied to the celebration. That's what those were about. If you look at that exhibit, I think it's 3-40, you can see that the orphan gifts were accessed at the same time, down to the second, as a picture of the Midway mansion. So what do we know about these gifts? We know that some photos were stored in a cache on the phone, not connected to any particular text. We know that they were accessed the morning of the 4th. We know that at least one of the pictures, the one of the mansion, was sent by Eric the evening before, which likely means all of these photos were sent prior to the morning of the 4th. These were not about Eric's death. She wasn't celebrating death. These gifts were sent earlier, and she was celebrating closing on that mansion. It just doesn't follow she would kill him for money. She received less from life insurance than she thought.
She couldn't have made money unless she had life insurance proceeds. So even if you want to take it from your angle, counsel, she would not have made any money, and it still wasn't enough money, all that life insurance money. She also thought she was going to get all the trust money and the proceeds of the house. The house was going to be in her name now and all that. So no, she thought she was going to be winning the lottery in essence.
She was going to make on that mansion. Josh Grossman told you that she was surprised when she found out about the $1 million life insurance policy from auto insurance. It appears she didn't even know that. And if you take Brooke Carrington's testimony as true, And by the way, she was a good witness. She is a professional expert witness. First hired by the family and then paid $200,000 by the state. A prosecution witness sitting right here today behind the prosecution. Very different than the MEs who were just here to tell you their findings. But anyway, if you accept her testimony, the life insurance wasn't going to fix the problem anyway. Kouri spent that life insurance within a matter of weeks and was still in debt. And you know what you heard on that phone call between Bryce and Chelsea?
She thought it was going to work, but in the end, look at how she went through money. It wasn't even to fix up the mansion.
And Kouri, all I want's the home. It's all I want. They can have everything else. They can have the money. I don't care. I just want my house where I've raised my boys. And you know what? Eric was making good money. In 2020, he told Christina Miller, the attorney he went to about talking about a divorce, that he was making, his income that year was over $33,000 a month. Cody Wright testified that they made $500,000 each the last year that Eric was alive. I believe there was testimony that there were other years she made even more. Not sure about that, but I think that was in there. So if this case was about money, Eric was worth so much more to Kouri alive than dead.
So misleading. Only if they still stayed married. If he divorced her, she was out broke, completely broke and bankrupt.
Opportunity. Well, I guess her opportunity was she was the only one in the house. Who else was in the house, though? Who else had an opportunity to take those pills? Eric. 4 years later, 10,000 searches, over $300,000 worth of expert witnesses, 3 weeks of trial, the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, the Summit County Sheriff's Office. They cannot tell you how Eric ingested that fentanyl. They haven't done their job, and now they want you to make inferences based on paper-thin evidence. They speculated on a number of things during closing, and they want to tell you, they want you to do their job for them. Tell them no. Tell them if they're going to charge a person in your community with the most serious crime there is, they better have the facts. They better have the proof. They better have more than speculation and conjecture because that's their job. It's not your job. I want to talk about the elements. The first one, aggravated murder.
It's important for lawyers to talk about the elements and how the state has failed to prove each and every one of the elements.
So they have to prove that that Kouri Richins intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Eric Richins. The state has not proven this. They haven't even proven that she obtained fentanyl. They have not proven where the pills ended up or how Eric took them. The state stood up here and argued, well, it really doesn't matter what drug she purchased. As long as it was an illicit street drug, it absolutely matters. Because what did he die of? He died of fentanyl. There was no oxycodone in his system. There was no other drug in his system. They must prove that she purchased and gave him fentanyl.
That's not true. They only have to prove that she obtained a poison with intent to kill him. She could have thought it was fentanyl, but it was something else. As long as that's the thing that killed him and she wanted him dead, that meets the elements for aggravated murder.
Oh, and let me talk about Becky Lloyd for 1 minute. She said that she had a conversation after a drink or two.
So she only talks about the element for murder, and now she goes off on some other tangent here.
Where Kouri allegedly said, things would be easier. I'd be better off if Eric was dead. But what else did you hear? You heard Becky in a recording tell the officers and investigators, I don't think I can testify to that on the stand. I'm not sure that that's true. But then she testified to it. Well, maybe they threatened to bring a catch pole for her dog too. One thing I want to point out here, though, is if after looking at all the evidence, you believe that Ms. Richins accidentally obtained fentanyl when she thought she was getting oxycodone, and then Eric took those pills voluntarily and died, that is not intentionally and knowingly. That is not aggravated murder. And if you conclude that, you must find Kouri Richins not guilty.
You know, you could have a chance at that, but when you have such financial motives, it's just overwhelming. And that sort of like fills in a lot of the other things that otherwise there would not be strong enough evidence to convict her on. If it was a drug deal conviction and stuff, you wouldn't have this conviction coming back, probably with the credibility that we had of Carmen and her supplier. But when you have all this overwhelming evidence of how she acts and how she acts guilty, trying to cover her tracks, and all the other things consolidated, you have a very strong case.
All right, attempted murder. What is the evidence of this? And again, it has to be intentionally or knowingly, and it has the rest of the elements there. She had to take a substantial step. So here's the evidence. Kouri bought an omelet and an egg sandwich at 9 o'clock the morning of February 14th. There was no evidence that she left that sandwich in the truck. To the contrary, there was a conversation with her mother saying, they think I left some sandwich in a truck. That didn't happen. Eric said he wasn't feeling well. He took a nap between 11:30 and 2. He called a couple of friends and sounded upset. He joked a few days later with Kouri and friends that his wife had tried to poison him, that he'd had an allergic reaction and used an EpiPen. Alex Staking told you that, Ollie Staking. She never said that Kouri got defensive. She didn't say that. She said they were all laughing. She said that Eric didn't seem upset or scared. It was a joke. It won't be the first time a spouse ate something and said, oh my God, my wife tried to poison me. But that's it. That's their entire case. He didn't go to the hospital. He didn't do anything that day but take a nap. Eating an egg sandwich, having an allergic reaction to something, and taking a nap. There is no world in which that is attempted murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Oh, they point out
with such conviction, not really, because she's reading it from a script. If you have to read from the script, then you're talking about losing credibility. And we've already caught her in so many things that aren't accurate, misstating things. So at least she has some passion. I guess that's the worst thing if you don't have a passion as an advocate. So at least she has some passion, but she's missing the mark on so many things, this Wendy Lewis.
Months later and text to Chelsea, her friend, that she gets some details wrong about that day. Maybe because she didn't try to kill him, and in her memory that day really wasn't all that important. She said, I bought him lunch. Well, it was breakfast. Again, they stood here and said, Eric was thinking this, Kouri was thinking this. She was, off with Josh thinking all these things. None of this was evidence, not any of it. None of it is proof. They talked about some IRS calls that she made on those days. No evidence as to what was in those calls. No witnesses from the IRS. Speculation, conjecture, not proof, reasonable doubt. Okay, I'm going to jump quickly. The other 3 counts I'm going to go through quickly, but I'm going to go to count 5, which is the forgery count. Now, remember what we're talking about here. This is one of those life insurance policies that any of us who belong to a credit union get, where you don't have to do anything. You sign here for $100,000 free life insurance. And this was filled out for both Kouri and Eric. Matthew Throckmorton, the handwriting expert, all he could tell you is that Eric probably did not sign the True Stage insurance policy.
Part of the scam.
Probably is reasonable doubt. And he could not tell you that Kouri did sign it.
Now when you have everything else consolidated.
They have not proven that Kouri forged Eric's signature. And there was no evidence either way if Kouri had permission to sign Eric's name on that True Stage life insurance. I mean, let's be serious. It's the rare married couple who doesn't occasionally say, hey, honey, I'm going to sign this for you. Is that okay? There was no evidence either way. She's not guilty of forgery. All right, jumping to the insurance fraud counts, count 3. Count 3 is directly connected to count 5, because this count alleges that Kouri fraudulently obtained that insurance policy, and the fraud was forging Eric's signature. They said there was a reversed social security number on there, but the fraud's the signature. So if the state hasn't proven to you count 5, it automatically follows they haven't proven count 3, and you must find her guilty, not guilty on count 3. Count 4 alleges that Kouri fraudulently collected the true stage insurance policy. All that means is if she did kill her husband and then represented something different to collect that insurance, that would be fraud. But if you find Kouri Richins not guilty on count 1, you have to find her not guilty on count 4. The state has not proven their case. They don't have the evidence that Kouri Richins killed her husband. So instead, they have tried to show you as much evidence as they possibly can to convince you that she's the sort of person who would. Getting close to the end, I'm sure you would like me to stop talking, but I have to tell you, I'm afraid to stop talking. Because as I stand here right now, Kouri Richins is still cloaked in a presumption of innocence. I don't ever want to walk back to that table. As a defense attorney, that is one of the longest walks a lawyer can make.
Well, if you believe that you've successfully advocated for your client, the jury's going to do the right thing because the prosecution hasn't proved their case, why would that be such a scary walk back there?
This entire case is going to flash before my eyes. And all I will be able to think about once I sit down is, what did I miss? What did we miss? What didn't we tell you that you wanted to hear? Did I focus on what you wanted to know? Did we do enough? You're about to go through those doors and into the jury room and start deliberations. Everyone in this courtroom, everyone watching around the world, we all wish we could follow you and listen in. But that room, that jury room is yours. It's sacrosanct. In that room, you get to decide. And when you get in that room and you look at the evidence, if you think that Kouri Richins might have killed her husband, that she likely killed her husband, that she probably killed her husband, you must find her not guilty. Because maybe, probably, likely, very likely, none of these reach that extraordinary burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Casey Anthony's counsel.
I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things when you go into that room. First, you might be tempted to go around the room and take a vote for guilty or not guilty to see where you all stand. We ask that you refrain from this. Instead, we ask, talk to each other about where you see reasonable doubt. Also, if Kathy or Alex or myself did something to offend you during this trial, please hold that against us and not against Kouri. Now, the state's going to get up and talk to you again because they get the last word. And the reason they have that last word is because of that heavy burden. But when you filled out that jury questionnaire, we asked you if you would be comfortable making your voice heard in that jury room. Would you stand by your convictions, by what you believe? And each and every one of you said yes. So here's my
That's a weird thing to show that flashed out on the screen.
final ask of you. When you're deliberating and something comes up that we didn't respond to, will you be courageous? Courageous enough to raise your hand and talk about what our response would be. Raise your hand for Kouri, because you are the last line between an innocent woman and the state. Be courageous. Courage is what this moment demands. The courage to stand between a member of your community and the state and demand that they comply with the Constitution.
So in other words, I don't really like this point she's making. Yeah, be courageous, whatever. But in other words, if you don't raise your hand, then you're a coward. I don't know. I have a different way of appealing to the motivations of the jurors. So I just thought this site might be sort of a way to make them feel guilty, make them feel like, I don't know. It just falls off for me here.
They comply with their burden. Do not let them fool you. Do not fall for red herrings. Kouri Richins did not kill Eric Richins. The state did not prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have the courage to tell them this and find Kouri Richins not guilty.
She doesn't want to have to walk back there near
Mr. Bloodworth.
Your Honor, 15 minutes now will save me 30 minutes.
All right, so then they took a quick break, and then we saw some of this. I'm not going to go through all this, I don't think, here.
Could not face the man whose son she had just murdered. We're going to play these clips right here now. her children, but she's going to talk to her children. Notice Kouri Richins' reaction in the moment. To this will be Katie Richins' reaction in the moment. Go ahead, Scott.
Where are your children now?
Asleep in that room. Two are awake with their ear to the door. I don't want them to go out. Please don't take them out.
We don't know. We went to bed.
Hey, Clint, here, who's gonna help her? Where are my boys?
The kids are in there.
Where's my brother?
He's in this room.
No.
Yeah, that sounds something distraught. Compare that with Kouri.
Baby.
Corey, is there a way we could relocate your boys upstairs?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of traffic.
Yeah, I'll tell her to. What? Wait, okay.
The poor sister there. Scared herself.
Kouri Richins walks away.
Mom, they got all the kids.
Katie then takes the boys upstairs.
The trauma for her to have
In
to live
moments
that.
of tragedy and profound sorrow, you not only comfort your children, they comfort you.
Esther's looking mean.
Kouri Richins hides her face because she doesn't know how to react because she is not grieving.
That's really good.
She doesn't want to see her other people see.
This is intricate details. You never see attorneys go this level of details that I've come across. This is really good.
Her non-reaction. She's not grieving because she feels no grief. She just murdered Eric.
That's bold.
You heard Deputy Wynn testify. She wasn't crying.
Look at her shaking her head, rolling her eyes. Yeah, you weren't, Kouri. You think the jury's going to believe you?
Deputy Wynn's body camera did catch a moment of surprise. That's the moment he informed her that he, Deputy Wynn, was sending Eric's body for an autopsy. That's her surprise. She didn't tell anybody that night that Eric used fentanyl because she thought she would get away with it. She didn't think anybody would find out that Eric used fentanyl. And the minute Deputy Wynn said, "We're sending his body for an autopsy," that's her reaction. The 2016 empty hydrocodone bottle is immaterial. Eric had no hydrocodone in his toxicology results. Warrant.
Let's jump ahead here.
When you strip out rhetoric that could be argued at any closing, anytime, anywhere, on any case, when you strip that out of defense's closing and you hone in on substance, the entire substance of the defense's argument is based around trying to explain the walk the dog letter. Kouri Richins is saddled with this letter and needed to craft the defense around this letter. It's obvious that the letter was written to get her brother to testify to a narrative that would explain everything.
Jury gets that. 100%.
Let's unpack the letter evidence.
We don't need to go through that.
Kind of, but Ronnie,
Say, tell her brother what to say.
Ronnie needs,
All that sign of guilt.
and despite all the evidence, Kouri Richins doubles down and blames Eric. She is intensely ambitious. See through her facade, check her ambition. Do not let her get away with murder.
Awesome job. Awesome job, Brad
All right.
Bloodworth.
Next step. Brittany, if you would please.
Okay, let's go ahead to the verdict then. They said it'd be read at 6:20 Mountain Time. They were a little bit later than that.
Expect that person will say yes. I'll ask them to hand the verdict to the bailiff, hand it to me. I will read the verdict. This brings me to important instruction number 1. There can be no outward reactions whatsoever. Indeed, Mr. Bloodworth, are we ready?
Go down if you have a reaction. Corey's coming in now. Corey's looking nervous. She's not looking
I do not. Do you want me to?
so confident. Her attorney, look at her attorney on the right. I can just read attorneys' reactions. They know this thing is going to be a crushing defeat for them. They know. They don't look. They have zero confidence. I mean, they know they got completely crushed and steamrolled by the prosecutor in his closing. The evidence, they're not able to make anything that makes any sense for her. No lawyer can get her out of this. It's just that strong of a case, presented so thoroughly and flawlessly.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, with the 4-person you've selected,
Keep in mind they have 8 jurors. They had 4 alternates, which I think is strange. I think there should be 12. But if there's 8 and not 12, that means you can get a quicker verdict. Not always, but oftentimes.
all right. Counsel, Ms. Richins, please stand.
I think this is good that the defendant has to stand. That's how we have it in many jurisdictions, many states or federal courts. But I think it's a good thing. Make them stand.
Count 1, aggravated murder.
Look at her reaction.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of aggravated murder. We, the jury, unanimously agree that the prosecution has proved.
Disappointed, but not devastated. Just disappointed. No shock. No denial.
Following circumstance or circumstances regarding count 1 beyond a reasonable doubt. The homicide was committed for pecuniary gain, and the homicide was committed by means of the administration of any substance administered in a lethal amount, dosage, or quantity. Count 2, attempted aggravated murder. We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of attempted aggravated murder. We, the jury, unanimously agree the prosecution has proved the following circumstances or circumstances regarding count 2 beyond a reasonable doubt. The attempted homicide was committed for pecuniary gain. Count 3, insurance fraud. We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of insurance fraud. Count 4, insurance fraud. We, the jury, unanimously
No reaction. Just looks down. This does not faze in her.
find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of insurance fraud. Count 5, forgery. We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Kouri Richins, is guilty of forgery. It's signed by the foreperson. Please have a seat.
You know, she's acting more like Charlie Adelson than Donna. Remember Donna's famous outburst?
Madam Foreperson, is this the verdict that the jury reached unanimously?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you may have a seat.
I think she's actually having a sigh of relief because she knows she's had to act this charade this whole time. And now all these years of having to act and talk all this innocent stuff and what's going on in my case and such limited access to seeing family and her kids as well, I'm sure. And now it's just sort of like, okay, now I can get on with my prison life once this is over. So in a way, it's really like she'll actually, I think, sleep better tonight than she did last night.
Ms. Lewis, Ms. Nestor, do you wish the jury to be polled?
Yes, please.
All right. Folks, I'll ask you the same yes or no question.
You know, you can tell the family's also relieved. They're not celebrating. They're not dancing and, oh, yeah, we got her. We're like, this is awesome. No, it's just another tragedy. Yeah, she's guilty, but, you know, they're thinking about the kids. Now they lost a mom as well. It's just ugly all around, even though this is justice as to the murder of Eric Richins, but it's just such an ugly mess on so many levels, and especially the loss for those poor children.
One at a time, starting on my left, working this way. Front row first. If you could show me your lanyard number as I ask you. Juror number 5, is this the verdict you voted in favor of?
Yes.
Juror number 4, is this a verdict you voted in favor of? Juror number 3.
Yes.
I can't see your name. I'm so sorry. The foreperson. I just need to ask you again. I'm sorry. Juror number 2.
Yes, it is.
Juror number 1.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir. Juror number 8.
Yes.
Juror number 7.
Yes.
Juror number 6.
Yes.
All right. Counsel, is there anything further on this case before the jury is discharged? Mr. Bloodworth.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ms. Lewis.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this trial is now finished. Thank you for your service. The American system of justice relies on your time and your sound judgment, and you have been generous with both. You serve justice by your fair and impartial decision. All of my previous admonitions are now lifted. You may speak about this case with anyone or with no one at all. It is entirely up to you. You might be contacted in the future by the press or by the lawyers. You do not have, if you bear with us.
Let's just flick the
Ms.
final
Lewis, we need to
reaction to Kouri. There's her mom. No emotion. It's like they expected
Mr.
her.
Bloodworth. April is
You know what her
not possible.
sentencing date is? That's
Ms.
what they're
Lewis,
discussing now. It's May
I-
13th. That's Eric's birthday, as I understand.
To do it during the week of May 25 or the morning of May 13. But if those times don't work, May 13. We're hereby referring Ms. Richins for the preparation of a pre-sentence investigation report. Ms. Lewis, anything else on the record today?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Bloodworth.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Richins, I'll see you again, May 13, 9:30 a.m. I need everyone to stay seated, follow the instructions of the sun.
All right, that's it, folks, for the trial. Wow, what a relief that justice was done. But you know, it's very sad. It's very sad. She's got a lot of years ahead of her. She could have lived out in good health, wonderful kids to enjoy. And all this because of some whacked out dream to become rich and have this appearance of wealth and status that gets you nothing. I mean, her kids are worth more than anything like that could provide, but in her mind, it's not. She was never happy, never satisfied with what money she had, and so it's just very, very sad on every level possible. And so glad justice is done for Eric and his family. It's been a long, long ordeal for them. So I will cover the sentencing sometime after it happens, and we'll regroup on this one then. And meanwhile, between now and then, I'm not sure what case I'll cover. I've not been looking down the radar on where that will be. This one was supposed to last a couple more weeks from what I originally was told. So this one ended sooner. And again, the defense had nothing to present. They had one witness that they extended on cross-examination from the government's case into their own direct witness, so to speak, but they really had nothing to work with. And so she got ineffective defense, or I don't see anything on appeal that's going to get this thing vacated and overturned. And so, yeah, some of y'all are saying Eric's birthday, what was the 13th? Is the 13th. And so, yeah, so I'm wishing you all the best. Thanks for your support for justice for this cause. And more to follow, so stay tuned. Thanks. Have a great week. And thanks for your wishes and all your support. Hopefully I'll start feeling better here before too long. But appreciate you all. Appreciate your clean chat as well in your pursuit of justice and truth. So thanks. Have a good night.